Welcome to our Urban Legends podcast. I'm Dr. Gloria McDaniel Hall. I've been a teacher, a principal, and assistant superintendent, all within urban schools in Chicago and around the country. Our Urban Legends podcast is a forum for sharing ideas, strategizing together, and supporting each other as we dismantle the deficit narratives sometimes associated with urban education and discuss where and how amazing work is being done. Welcome, everyone, to another edition of my podcast named Urban Legends. And it's called Urban Legends because we feature people who have or are doing amazing things in our schools. And I don't think that I have had the pleasure of having a teacher who I've worked with before, being able to interview somebody who I've worked with before, who's gone on to do such amazing things as my guest today, Miss Danielle Green, who we just were trying to figure out how long ago it was that I met her. And we think it's about 23 years ago when she was a first year teacher and hired her to be the gym teacher at our school. But we're going to talk about the whole story. So Danielle, welcome to
Thank you,
Urban
Dr.
Legends.
Hall. It is a pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you. So usually I start by asking people to share their journeys in education, and your journey is kind of around the topic of education, but I want you to share more about your journey as a student in the inner city of Chicago and focus on elementary and high school and the teachers who were in your life who made a difference, your whole, just like your life story. Just talk to us and tell us and how important teachers were to your journey.
Okay. Well, I grew up in the inner city of Chicago during the height of the crack epidemic in the 80s and 90s. And my mom, she was thriving back then, but then the epidemic hit and she turned to crack cocaine. And I saw that early on. And our life became very turbulent. Life became very difficult. And I knew that was something I didn't want to follow in her footsteps, although I loved her. And I went to several different elementary schools as a result because we were always being kicked out or evicted. So I went to my first school was O'Keefe on the south side of Chicago, then Fraser, and then Brian Piccolo. And that's where I met some amazing teachers, starting with my first basketball coach, Mrs. Melcher. And she played Division II basketball. So she had a real grasp of the game. And so she taught us everything she knew. And at that point, I started realizing I may have a future in this game. And I started thinking heavily about the University of Notre Dame, playing at the University of Notre Dame. There was another teacher, Mrs. Cato, Geraldine Cato. She was one of the special education teachers at Brian Piccolo. And we became close because I used to work at a candy store around the corner. And she worked there too because her partner, he worked there. And we just struck up a really cool relationship. And she became like my play mother. Like I met her when I was 11 and now I'm 46 years old. And she just retired a couple of years ago. And she's the only person in my life that has seen me play at the middle school level, the high school level, and the college level. And so I love her like my mom. And so she was never my teacher, but she was just a professional, high-class person. She showed interest in me. She was always positive, no matter how I felt. She never really knew what was going on in my home because I never really talked to anybody about that. But she said when I got older, she could sense something was going on. And that's why she took me underneath her wings. And so she followed me throughout, my collegiate career. And then in high school, I met some pretty nice folks. My coach, like I said, my coaches, my guidance counselor. I think that's why I have a master's in school counseling, because Miss Kaplan, I'm still buddies with her today, and she just turned 80 years old a couple of weeks ago. And we still have a strong relationship. Just those people that care about you and love you and willing to put you in a position where you can succeed. And when they see you going off the track a little bit, they can steer you back in. And that was Miss Kaplan in high school. In high school was my high school coaches, Mr. Taylor and Mr. Walters. Mr. Taylor, we just went on a cruise together for Christmas break. So those are those meaningful relationships that start when you're young and they just continue to evolve over the course of your adulthood. So I've always, I didn't have the support that I needed at home. I had my grandmother who always thought that, I was going to be somebody, but then I needed those coaches and those teachers just to, give me that extra oomph, like, you can do it. If you want to go to Notre Dame, you can do it. If you want to be somebody in life, we're here for you no matter what. So even when middle school was over, high school was over, those key figures still played an instrumental part in my development. Even to this day, I can call them if I just need some words of inspiration or motivation, or just, I'm having a hard time making a decision. They're still there for me. So those were the.
Danielle, like, what does that look like for, like, if you were to give advice to children who, and I certainly don't want to paint the picture that every child who's in an inner city school is struggling with anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you were to give advice to children who find themselves in a situation that's difficult at home, but then don't know like who to reach out to at school, how did you figure out which teachers you could trust? Like which teachers you could, I don't know if you can remember back to 9-year-old Danielle, but
I mean, I can. It was tough because you're this little kid in this big world, and you really don't have anyone. I had my grandmother, but she had to deal with my mom and her other kids, and so it was tough. And so I would say at 9, I was still alone because I think I was 4th grade, 5th grade. I think what opened up things for me, I always had this goal of joining the military or going to the University of Notre Dame. So I remember that being a
a pool.
gateway. Like I could have a conversation with people, even if they looked at me like I was crazy, because most of the teachers did. They was like, Notre Dame, young lady, that's a lofty goal. Good luck with that. Um, you just know, you can sense the teachers that are really into it and the teachers that are just there. I hate to say this, for a paycheck. And I used to
Yep.
hear that quite often,
Yep.
you know.
Okay, so this wasn't one of the questions we prepped, but how did you end up going to Notre Dame? How did you get? I remember you telling me the story when we were working together, but how did you finagle that? Like,
I like I said, at seven, I remember watching Notre Dame football, and it was always on. And I remember a 7-story mural of Touchdown Jesus. And Touchdown Jesus, for people who don't know, it's a 7-story mural on Hesburgh Library in the north end zone. So when you kick a field goal, you're kicking the field goal into Jesus' arms. And I thought that was cool. And then I saw the Golden Dome and I saw the Basilica, and I said, this place must be special. So I attached to that immediately. I said, this is going to get me, I'm going here. But then during halftime or the commercials, I would see military commercials. So that's where the military component. And so I needed something just to aspire to, just to hook me, so I didn't fall prey to my environment. And whoever would listen to me, I would just tell them. And I didn't know how I was going to get there until sometime in middle school. I said, you know what? I may have and that's when I discovered basketball. And I just kept working. And people think you have to be like, I'm really super, super smart, but I work hard. I'm a gritty individual, and I believe in putting in the work and putting in maximum effort. And that's what got me there. I didn't have the highest ACT, SAT scores. I didn't have a 4.5, but it was just grit and resiliency and just people believing in me. I told enough people where eventually 90 miles down the road, Coach McGraw said, let me check this lady out. And I performed very well. When she looked at me, she said, you know what, we want to offer you a scholarship. And so at 17, I was offered a scholarship. And the next year I signed a letter of intent to play and study at the University of Notre Dame, despite the odds.
That is amazing. That story is amazing every time I hear it. So when we worked together at the first school where I was principal. It was Chicago International Prairie. Um, I remember you just being an amazing force when you came in to interview with me. We didn't have to have people who were certified teachers. It was the beginning of the charter school
Thank
movement, which was
goodness.
cool. But I could tell your passion for sport. I could tell your passion for kids. I think we talked a really long time in our interview. I'm like, we got to offer this lady a position. I don't know what you remember, but
I remember it.
that
I remember the interview like it was yesterday. It was Linda. She was your assistant principal at the time. And
yes.
I remember I did not come dressed professionally. I had some outfit on, blue outfit. It was nice. I thought I looked nice. I had no pantyhose. I'm like, oh goodness, I didn't even prepare right for the interview. Because Linda told me later on, she was like, you wasn't dressed, professionally. She told me, and I was like, oh my God. So I do remember, and I just felt blessed and so honored that you believed in me, because at that point in my life, I was 23, I was fresh out of college, and I was a little directionless. Like I didn't really have a direction, but I knew at some point I might want to go into education. So I said, well, if she gives me an opportunity, then I can explore some different avenues. And thank you for that, because it did. Oh, I did go in a different direction, but it did broaden my horizons of what
Right.
potentially could be out there.
It would, and from what I remember, so you jumped right in with your 23-year-old self, took our kids and made them love sports, made them love gym class. Your lesson plans were the same expectations that we have from everybody for
They
lesson
sure
plan.
was. I remember. Yes.
It wasn't different because I actually think that we downplay what we call the specials classes, gym, art, music. They really allow kids, the other side of them, to come forward. And you were able, I think it was girls and boys you coached. I can't remember, but
Uh-huh.
you did amazing. And
So,
then one day you walked into my office and said, "Oh, I need to talk to you. I think I'm going to leave and join the military." And I was like, "No, Danielle, don't leave us, please." But okay, all right.
but I got to
I'm
tell you the
gonna,
secret. I have to tell you the secret to my
what?
success at the school. So my husband, Willie, he wasn't my husband at the time, but he was a PE teacher at Washington High School. So I got
Oh,
a lot of pointers. So don't forget, you allowed me to leave the school a little bit early to go coach at the high school,
oh, that's
Washington
right.
High School. So he was a PE teacher. So he had all the latest like not toys, but things
The two of
so you
class,
could teach.
yeah.
And so he taught me a lot. So that was my secret ingredient was my
Secret
late
weapon.
husband. Yes, yes. So
Oh,
he schooled me. And you're right. The first time, do you remember the first time I left Prairie? The
I
first
do remember.
yeah, the first
I
time I
know
left,
you came
because
back, but
right,
yes.
I was still searching. So I had entered a program at UIC. It was a science and math program. And the first day I got there, I was like, I am not a science and math person. And I talked to the crawler, Miss Jackson. I said, you think she'll take me back? And I think she talked to you.
Like,
and,
tell her to come
and you
back.
scolded me and told me, hey, these are the rules. No more chances out of this. And I was like, okay, I got it. I got it. Thank you.
You know I wanted you back. But then you joined the military, and the next time I heard from you was not such a happy time. Tell us about your experience in the military and now what you're doing with the Wounded Warrior Project, how that
Okay.
led to that.
So in 2003, at the age of 26, I decided that I wanted to fulfill another childhood dream, and that was serve my country. So after researching each branch, I decided to join the Army. Instead of going in as an officer, I went in enlisted. And my final two choices were between becoming a military police officer or counterintelligence. And so I went military police officer. 16 months later, I found myself on a rooftop in Iraq. So I was in Iraq for 4 months. So we arrived to Iraq in January of 2004. And so May 25th, 2004, I was on the rooftop patrolling the area because we were police officers. So we trained them and to get them ready to serve their people, their communities. Moments later, while I was on the rooftop, I was hit by a rocket propelled grenade. At the time, I didn't know that it had separated my dominant left arm from my body. All I could feel was the pain that penetrated my entire body. And I remember just laying there waiting to die. But after a few minutes, I realized I wasn't. So I said a prayer and I looked into the sky and I said, God, I don't know what I've done in this lifetime, but give me the strength to be able to tell my story. And I wanted a child. And I felt this surge of energy hit my body, like I could actually get up and run, but I couldn't. And by that point, I could see my uniform was tattered with blood and my leg was damaged. And I found out a few hours later that my arm was separated from my body, so it was amputated. But I received a Purple Heart, and a Purple Heart is a medal that is received for combat wounds or wounds sustained in combat. So I was awarded with the Purple Heart. Yeah, so that's how that went. Came home and I had to let go of the old Danielle. Now I had to reinvent or recreate a new Danielle where I had to learn how to use my right hand, and I was not right hand dominant. So can you imagine simple tasks like putting on earrings, cooking, driving, putting on a bra, tying your shoes up? They all became like chores. They were really challenging. But after several months, a couple of years, everything kind of became second nature. As I was reinventing myself, I decided to go back to graduate school. Now I was focused. When I worked for you, I was not focused as I should have. I knew where I needed to go. And so I enrolled at St. Xavier and I completed a master's degree in school counseling, because my guidance counselor, my coaches, they were influential role models in my life. So I said, I want to give back. And then I remember my experience at Prairie. So I got my master's in school counseling. And then I was so motivated, I went to DePaul University and got a master's in educational leadership.
Oh my goodness.
Because I wanted to be a school counselor, then eventually become a dean, and I wanted to coach. I was preparing myself for a field in education like many of my mentors.
Right.
But God had different plans. I did work for the Board of Education for 5 years before my next calling came, and that was to work for the Department of Veterans Affairs, where I worked for 12 years. I worked as a clinical therapist, working with veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder, military sexual trauma, a little bit of substance abuse. I did that for 6 years, and then I moved over to benefits. And then last year I resigned and I took on a spokesperson role with Wounded Warrior Project, where I go around and I raise awareness through my story, through storytelling, to tell veterans that you don't have to suffer alone, and to remind the public that just because the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq are over, this need is still greater. So that's what I do now. I travel all over the country to raise awareness and to get the communities involved in terms of donating and partner, because we don't receive government funding. So it's all private donations. So that's what I do now. And I really, really enjoy it.
So the recurring theme in your story is I don't give up. I just keep going some sort of way. Is it spiritual? Is it religious? Is it I just can't give up? Like what is it? What is that?
I think it's called resiliency. If you think about basketball, that basketball is like a rebound. It comes back and it keeps coming back as long as you give it strength and you give it energy. And so with me, it's just remembering that 7-year-old girl who saw her mom suffering and struggling, and just knowing that if I can overcome this without little support, little resources, like I can overcome anything. And I just think my experiences over time, the people that have touched me, like you and Mr. Taylor, Miss Kaplan, and I didn't even mention my college experience. I worked with a sports psychologist for 5 years, Dr. Franco at the University of Notre Dame. So I think that collaboration of like wonderful people really helped me to overcome, losing my arm, and continue to propel me to do the things that I am now. And knowing that I can inspire people, just by my story. And it's just not veterans. It's anybody and everybody.
It's mothers.
Yes.
It's women. It's
right. It's that empowerment.
yes.
And so that's Wounded Warrior Project's mission statement, to honor and empower wounded warriors. And so if my story, people listening to this today can be inspired of like, if she can do it, I can do it, or that's what it's about. And I realize that I have a friend who has a great quote. She says, life doesn't give you a second chance, or I can't remember. I got to think about, I'll remember it as we conclude. But you got to make the most of it while you're here on earth. So maybe there is a spiritual component there.
Yes. So I met Daniel when he was your amazing little man, when he was a baby, and just saw him again before we started filming today. And you have done an outstanding job. He's brilliant, and he just seems so sincere. How did you do that? How did you do that?
He's my why. So I told you my prayer on the rooftop. So I'm actually in a position where I get to share. I survived, but I have an opportunity to share my story. And that second prayer up there was I wanted a child. And 10 years after my injury, God blessed me with this beautiful baby. So now I get to share these experiences with him, and I get to give him everything that my mom was unable to give me. And I know she loved me. I know she did, but she was just, they say drugs is a
Struggling.
disease. She had a disease. And so I reflect on that, and I just, I let him know. I try to give him some examples of struggle, but I don't want him to struggle like I struggle. And I'm just, Dr. Hall, I'm just blessed with a kid that's gifted, highly talented. He plays the piano, he plays trumpet, he just discovered choir, he sings, he likes to dance. He's just everything I wish I would have had an opportunity to explore as a kid, but I'm thankful that I'm in a position to allow him to explore some things, and he can see what he likes and doesn't like and what he wants to take to the next level.
Yes.
But he's my why. He's my inspiration, and just trying to raise a strong brown young man so he can contribute to the next generation, to our
I
society.
love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So, what messages would you give to teachers? We talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but particularly teachers who are in inner city or urban schools. And I don't look at urban as a bad term.
Oh, no
I,
way. No.
what advice would you give them? Like, how do you know who the little ones are in front of you who need you the most? Like, what would you say to teachers? Why is it so important we take every opportunity to get to know and build relationships with our students?
The first thing, I don't think you can look at it as a job. Um, you can't look at it as just a paycheck. I forgot to tell you that I was recently hired as a part-time school counselor here in Florida. So
Yes.
now I get to actually utilize my master's degree and give back to the community. So with that being said, it's like you're giving back to your community if you're from that area. So you're giving back. Um, it's more than just teaching to the test. It's getting to know the kids, those kids that are sitting over there in the corner to themselves. They may need somebody just to believe in them and talk to them, and they may not open up. But I mean, we teach for what, 40 something weeks or maybe 35 weeks. You have an opportunity to really inspire and make an impact. That's the biggest thing, is to make an impact. And I have about 10 teachers and coaches who made an impact, and they probably won't come to you, but hey, little John, do you need a hug today? Little John, I have the ear for you. Come sit down, talk to me. And just be that, because that may be missing from their household.
Right.
And that
Right.
was missing from my household. And thank goodness I had a Miss Cato in my life. And everybody needs a Miss Cato, everybody needs a Dr. Hall. You just need that one person. So just keep your antennas out for those kids who are just out there
Yeah.
alone. And I'm not saying you should be friends with them, because we have to establish those boundaries, but they need to be heard. They need to know that you love them, that you care, and it's not just about a paycheck. It has to be on a deeper level, because you don't know what that kid is going to soak in and become someday.
Right. And from what I see a lot of times at school, it's the really quiet children, but it's also the ones who show out and get on your nerves all the time
Yes.
that need you the most. And I
Right.
see that it's kind of like a strategy those kids use. Like, I'm gonna just act up. They'll
Mm.
ignore me like everybody else does. But when you don't, and when you build relationships with them, those are
Those are the
last.
ones that excel, because they just needed that one person just to listen. And you just got to listen and be there for them. So I'm excited about this new role, because I've been waiting for this opportunity to come. And I have almost zero experience being a school counselor, but they
Don't
believe
tell anybody. Just go in there, go in there and knock it out the park like
that
you
that's what I
always
plan on. That's what I plan on doing.
do.
So yes, I would tell teachers, be that child's advocate. And even if they do have a supportive family, maybe that family's putting a lot of pressure on them and that's breaking them down. So you have to look at it from all different types of angles.
Yeah.
And it's okay if you're not perfect or if you don't get an A,
Yeah.
I mean, get a B, get a C. I tell my little boy, you don't have to get straight A's in this house. I'm okay with A's, B's, and maybe a C because maybe it's geometry.
And I can't help you with that one.
I can't help you. But as long as you give maximum effort,
Right.
I'm with you. I'm
Right.
with you. And so that's
Right.
the same thing. I just ask that teachers just give maximum effort, give what you can give, because you don't know how you're going to impact that kid later on in life.
Yes.
And that was what was so profound about, I lost my husband about 12 years ago. He had over 150 people at his funeral. That's quite a bit. He made that much of an impact in his 30 plus years of teaching and coaching. And I said, you know what? I would love it when it's time for me, I would love to have 100 people there to celebrate my life.
Right.
And that's what it's about.
Right. Right. Okay. So last question. I end each interview with a reflection on a quote. And Michelle Obama has a quote that came to mind when I was thinking about you. Here's the quote, and then you got to tell me what you think and how it
Okay.
goes. Instead of letting your hardships and failures discourage or exhaust you, let them inspire you. Let them make you even hungrier to succeed. What do you think about that quote?
I love that quote. I have used each experience. So I look at it as lifting weights. You start off a little light, 5-pound weights, and then you get a little stronger. Okay, I'm gonna pick up these 10-pound. Now I'm gonna move to 15 and 20. At some point, I'm gonna get to my max. But I look at each stage, each experience in my life, building upon the next, like a pyramid, until I get to that I don't want to say self-actualization, if you know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but just to that point where I feel fulfilled, like I've done everything that I could do in this lifetime to impact change, to inspire, to motivate, to lead the next generation of folks. So that's how I look at it. And the fact that I'm not done yet, that I still get a chance to work for Wounded Warrior Project. And now I get to dabble at being a part-time school counselor. Like, it doesn't get any better than that. So that's what that means to me. It's just building upon each level or each experience in your life. And that really moving back, you can reflect on some things, take some lessons, but how can you apply that now? And now I get to apply all these lessons when I become a counselor. That's what that means to me. So I'm still building. I'm still, stepping up on my pyramid.
That is awesome. Danielle, you are one of the most inspirational people I know. I know you talk about me and teachers and how people have impacted you, but you've also impacted me. Your positivity, your resolve, your care, your just everything about the way you operate is such an inspiration to me. And I really want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to interview you and talk to you for
You're
Urban
welcome,
Legends.
Dr. Hall.
You are going to change some lives when people hear your message.
Thank you so much. It's so great to reconnect with you, stay connected with you, and you keep changing the world too. One student, one kid, one colleague at a time, because you've been doing it. You have put in the work.
Thank you so much.
You continue to put it in.
Thank you.
You're welcome.